Part 5 morning came soft and slow. Pale light seeped through the curtains, painting the walls in gentle gold. The house was quiet, but not empty. Not anymore. She woke before anyone else. Slipped out of bed, wrapped herself in her old robe, and padded to the kitchen. The fire from last night had died down to warm embers, but the air still held the scent of cinnamon and chocolate. She smiled to herself. It felt different this morning, lighter, like a weight she'd carried for years had finally been set down in the living room. The kids were still curled under the quilt, breathing slow and steady. Her son lay on the armchair, one arm dangling over the side. His wife slept on the couch, one hand resting near her face like she was still dreaming. She watched them for a long moment, not with sadness, not with longing, but with peace. This was what she'd always wanted. Not perfection, not control. Just moments like this, real, messy human moments where love showed up even after hurt. She started the coffee, put water on for tea, then opened the pantry and pulled out flour, sugar, butter, and vanilla. She wasn't sure if they'd stay for breakfast, but she baked anyway, because that's what she did. That's who she was. As the batter mixed and the oven warmed, the house began to stir. First, the youngest child padded in barefoot, rubbing his eyes. He saw her at the counter and ran over. "Grandma, are those pancakes?" "Not pancakes," she said, ruffling his hair, "but something just as good." He climbed onto a stool and watched her pour batter into the pan. Asked 100 questions about how bubbles meant. Was ready why she used brown sugar instead of white if Santa really ate all the cookies. She answered each one like it mattered, because to him it did. One by one, the others joined. No rush, no stress. Just sleepy smiles and quiet hellos. His wife made coffee. He set the table with mismatched plates and cloth napkins she'd kept for years. They ate together right there in the small kitchen. Sunlight streaming in, laughter rising like steam from hot mugs. No grand speeches. No apologies repeated. Just presence. After breakfast, they walked outside. The snow had stopped. The world sparkled clean and new. The kids ran ahead, building a lopsided snowman, while the adults followed slowly. He walked beside her, hands in his pockets. "I'm sorry," he said. Simply, she didn't look at him right away. Just watched the kids pack snow between their mittens. "You don't have to be sorry for protecting your home, but I pushed you away." "You were confused," she said, "and that's okay. Love isn't about never making mistakes. It's about coming back when you do," he nodded. They walked a little farther. Then his wife joined them. She handed her a scarf. "You forgot this inside." She took it with a smile. "Thank you." The three of them stood together, watching the children laugh and tumble in the snow. No one spoke for a while. They didn't need to. Later that day, they drove back to their own house, but not before promising to return soon. Before loading the car with extra cookies and a jar of homemade jam, before hugging longer than usual as their taillights disappeared down the road, she stood on the porch, arms crossed against the cold. Not sad, not lonely, just full. That night she sat by the fire again. But this time, she wasn't alone in spirit. She picked up the journal, the one she'd sent hand, opened it to the last page. She traced the words with her finger, greater than. "You were dreamed of, greater than you were chosen." Twice she closed it, gently, and placed it on the shelf beside her. Favorite photo, the one of him at 5 years old, grinning with missing teeth, holding a lopsided clay mug he'd made her for Mother's Day. She never needed proof that he was hers. But now he knew too. And that changed everything. Over the next week's life settled into a new rhythm. Phone calls came more often, not just on Sundays, but sometimes midweek, just to say hello. His wife started texting her recipes, asking for advice about the kids' bedtime routines. Small things, but they mattered. One afternoon, a package arrived. Inside was a framed drawing from the kids. A picture of 4 stick figures holding hands under a big yellow sun. At the bottom, scribbled in crayon, "Greater than Grandma, you live in our hearts, even when you're far." She hung it in the kitchen. Right above the stove, Christmas came and went, but the warmth stayed. Not because of presents or decorations, but because something deeper had shifted. Trust had been rebuilt not with grand gestures, but with quiet consistency, with showing up, with listening, with space and grace. Months later, on a warm spring day, she received another letter. This time, it wasn't typed or formal. It was written in his handwriting on paper covered in tiny fingerprints. "We're coming for dinner Sunday. The kids want to help you bake. And I want to hear more about her, about my first mom. If you're willing to share," she wrote back the same day, "greater than. I've been waiting for you to ask that Sunday." They came early, brought flowers, stayed late. The kids helped her knead dough and stir soup. His wife sat at the table peeling carrots, asking questions about her sister. About her laugh, her favorite songs, the way she danced in the kitchen. She told them everything. Not with tears, but with joy. Because grief and love can live in the same room when they're held with care. And as they sat around her table, eating stew and fresh bread, she realized something. Beautiful family isn't about who gave you blood, it's about who gives you time, who shows up when it's hard, who stays when it's easier to walk away. Her son had two mothers, and both loved him fiercely in their own ways. One gave him life. The other gave him a lifetime of love, and now he carried both in his heart, no longer torn, just whole. She looked around the table at the smiling faces, the clinking spoons, the shared stories, and felt a quiet joy settle in her bones. This was enough. More than enough. Because love doesn't need to be loud to be strong. Sometimes it's just a letter, left on a porch, a locket passed down through silence, a seat saved at the table, and the courage to come back home, Evan, when you weren't sure you'd be welcome. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. No words needed, just love. Real simple, honest love. And that was the best gift of all. Part 4. The car tires crunched over fresh snow as they turned onto the quiet street where she lived. Houses lined both sides, wrapped in soft white blankets and twinkling lights, but hers stood out. Not because it was brighter or grander, but because it looked so still. Like a heart holding its breath, he parked at the curb. For a moment no one moved. The engine ticked as it cooled. The kids had fallen asleep in the back seats, their heads leaning against the windows, cheeks pink from cold and dreams. His wife reached over and squeezed his hand. "You ready?" He nodded, though his stomach felt tight like a knot pulled too hard. They got out quietly. Snowflakes landed on their coats, melted on their eyelashes. He carried the bag with the journal, the locket, and the letter. His wife held the thermos of hot chocolate like an offering. They walked up the path together. Each step felt heavier than the last. Not from guilt, but from something deeper, like walking toward a truth that could either heal or break them. He raised his hand too. Knock, but stopped. What if she didn't answer? What if she'd already gone to bed? What if she didn't want to see him? But then he remembered her smile in the letter. That quiet, knowing smile. She hadn't begged, hadn't argued, hadn't made him feel small. She'd just loved him enough to let go, and that was the bravest kind of love he'd ever known. He knocked softly at first, then again a little louder. Inside, a light flicked on. Shadows moved behind the frosted glass of the front door. The lock turned. The door opened slowly. She stood there in a simple sweater and slippers, her hair loose around her shoulders, eyes wide with surprise. She wasn't expecting anyone, least of all them. For a long second, no one spoke. Snow fell between them like silent witnesses. Then she saw the kids sleeping in the car, saw the thermos, saw the look in his eyes. Her face softened. Without a word, she stepped back and opened the door wider. They stepped inside. Warmth wrapped around them like a hug. The smell of cinnamon and old books filled the air. A fire glowed low in the living room. Stockings hung by the fireplace, just one set. Hers. She didn't ask why they were there. Didn't say, "I told you not to come." Just took their coats and hung them neatly by the door, like they belonged. His wife handed her the thermos. "We brought hot chocolate." She smiled. "Thank you." He held out the bag. "We got your package." She nodded slowly. "I wasn't sure you would open it." "I almost didn't," he admitted, "but I'm glad I did." She led them to the living room. The kids stirred when he lifted them gently from the car and carried them inside. They blinked sleepily, mumbled Grandma, and curled into the couch. Under a thick quilt she pulled from a nearby chair, she watched them with eyes that held decades of quiet love. Then she turned to him. "Do you have questions?" He sat down across from her. His wife stayed close, standing near the fireplace, arms crossed, not from cold, but from care. "Yes," he said a lot. She waited. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" She sighed softly. "Because I wanted you to feel whole, not split between two mothers, not wondering who loved you more. I wanted you to grow up knowing you were wanted, chosen, safe. But I wasn't yours." He said the words, tasting strange even as he said them. "You were always mine," she said, "simply not by blood maybe, but by choice, and choice is stronger than blood, because blood is given. Choice is earned, and I chose you every single day." He looked down at his hands, remembered her teaching him to ride a bike, staying up with him during fevers, sitting in the front row at every school play. She never missed a thing. "Your wife," she said gently. Looking at the woman by the fire, she didn't know either. He shook his head no. "I think she thought I was trying to take over," she said, "or that I didn't respect her role. But I did, I do. I just didn't know how to show it without losing you." His wife stepped forward then. "I was scared," she said, voice quiet. "Scared you'd always be her son first. And I'd always be the outsider. But reading that letter, seeing how much she gave up just to give him a chance, I realized she wasn't competing, she was completing." Tears welled in the older woman's eyes, but she didn't look away. The room stayed quiet, except for the crackle of the fire and the soft breathing of the sleeping children. After a while, he asked, "Did she suffer at the end?" She shook her head no. She was peaceful. She held your tiny hand and said, "Take care of my boy." "And I promised I would." He swallowed hard. "You kept that promise better than anyone could have." "I tried," she whispered. "You did more than try," his wife said. "You gave him everything." They sat together in that warm, quiet space as snow continued to fall outside. No grand speeches, no dramatic confessions, just truth settling into place like dust after a storm. Later, the kids woke up, rubbed their eyes, looked around confused, then grinned when they saw her. "Grandma," one said, running to her, "we came to see you." She knelt despite her stiff knees and hugged them tight. "I'm so glad you did." They talked then. About school, about cookies, about reindeer, normal things, simple things. The kind of things that stitch a family back together one thread at a time. She made hot chocolate for everyone, served it in mismatched mugs, put on an old Christmas record that skipped a little but played on anyway. No one mentioned the letter again. It didn't need to be explained. It had done its work. As the night wore on, he watched her laugh with his children, watched her listen to his wife's stories, watched her move through her home with grace and ease, and he realized something. He hadn't lost a mother. Tonight, he'd found two. One who gave him life, one who gave him love, and both had shaped him in ways he was only beginning to understand. Outside, the world was still covered in snow, cold, silent, waiting. But inside this small house on a quiet street, something warm was growing. Not just forgiveness, not just understanding, but belonging, real deep, true belonging. And it started with a letter, a locket, and a woman who loved enough to let go so they could find their way back. Part 3, Christmas Eve arrived with a hush that felt heavier than snow. The house was quiet, too quiet. No wrapping paper crinkling in the living room, no little feet running down the hallway, no excited whispers about Santa, just the soft tick of the old wall clock, and the occasional sigh from the furnace downstairs. He sat at the kitchen table staring at his coffee gone cold. His wife moved around the kitchen, quietly putting cookies on a plate. arranging candles on the counter, hanging the last few ornaments on the tree in the corner. She hadn't said much all day. Not since they'd agreed without really talking about it that this year would be different. No big dinner, no carols, no guests, just them. And yet the space felt empty in a way he couldn't explain. Earlier that morning, he'd found the package on the porch. No note, no return address. Just brown paper tied with red string, the kind his mother used to use when he was a boy. He almost didn't open it. Part of him wanted to leave it there, let the snow cover it like a secret. The world wasn't meant to see, but something pulled him. Now it sat on the table beside his untouched coffee. Still unopened, his wife paused near the sink. She glanced at the package, then at him. Her eyes were tired, but kind. She didn't ask what it was. She didn't say anything at all, but she stayed close, like she knew this moment mattered more than either of them had admitted. He took a breath and untied the string. Inside was a padded envelope. He opened it slowly, like it might break if he moved too fast. First came a letter. Simple paper, familiar handwriting. His chest tightened before he even read the first word. Then a small velvet pouch, and beneath it a thin, leather-bound journal. He picked up the letter first. His hands shook just a little. He read it once, then again. By the third time, his vision blurred. She told him everything about the hospital room, the rain, the promise she made to his birth mother, about how she held him when he cried for a woman he never got to know, how she kissed his forehead every night for years, whispering, "You are mine, and I am yours," like a prayer. He'd always known she loved him, but he never knew how deep that love went, how it began not with joy but with grief, not with ease, but with sacrifice. He looked up. His wife was watching him now, not with judgment, not with fear, just with quiet understanding. He handed her the letter without a word. She read it slowly. When she finished, she didn't speak right away. She just reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. Her fingers were warm, steady. "I didn't know," she finally said softly. He shook his head. "I didn't either." They sat like that for a long time. The house felt different now. Not empty, but full. Full of something old and true that had been waiting in the shadows. He opened the velvet pouch next. Inside was a silver locket. He clicked it open. A tiny photo of a young woman smiled back at him, soft eyes, gentle smile, hair blowing in the wind. On the other side, a baby's footprint stamped in ink. His breath caught. That's her. His wife whispered, "You're real, Mom." He nodded. Tears fell onto the table, but he didn't wipe them away. Then he picked up the journal. The leather was worn soft at the edges. He opened it carefully. Page after page filled with hopes, dreams, fears, notes about feeling him kick, plans for his nursery, lists of names she liked, scribbles about how scared she was but how happy. On the last page, written in shaky letters, "If you're reading this, my sweet boy, greater than know that I loved you before I ever saw your face, and that your aunt to your second mom loved you enough to carry us both greater than. Don't ever doubt you were wanted greater than you were dreamed of greater than. You were chosen twice." He closed the journal and pressed it to his chest, like it could stitch something back together inside. Him, outside the wind picked up. Snow swirled against the windows. But inside the room felt still. Sacred, his wife, stood up quietly and walked to the front door. She opened it just a crack and looked out. "There's no one out there," she said gently. "Just snow." He knew what she meant. His mother wasn't coming. And suddenly that thought hurt more than he expected, because now he understood. She hadn't stayed away because she didn't care. She stayed away because she cared too much, because she respected his home, his peace, his choice, even when it cost her everything. He remembered all the times she showed up without being asked, all the times she listened without fixing, all the times she loved without keeping score, and he had repaid her with silence, with a letter that cut deeper than he meant it to. He looked at his wife. "Do you think she's alone tonight?" His wife didn't answer right away. She walked back to the table and sat down again. "I think she's strong," she said, "but that doesn't mean she isn't hurting." He swallowed hard. The kids were already in bed dreaming of presents and reindeer. The tree lights glowed softly in the dark living room. Everything was ready for Christmas, but something was missing. Not gifts, not food, not decorations. His mother, the woman who taught him how to tie his shoes, who stayed up with him during thunderstorms, who saved every school project like it was treasure. He stood up suddenly. "We have to go." His wife looked up surprised. "Go where? To her house now. It's snowing. It's late. The roads." "I don't care," he said. "If we wait until morning, it'll be too late. Christmas will already be here, and she'll be sitting there thinking we don't care. Thinking she lost me forever." His wife studied his face. Then she nodded. Okay, she didn't argue, didn't sigh. Just stood up and started putting on her coat. He woke the kids gently. Told them they were going on a special trip. They rubbed their eyes, confused but excited. One asked, "Is Grandma getting a surprise?" He smiled through tears. "Yeah, sweetheart. We all are." They bundled up in scarves, hats, gloves, packed a thermos of hot chocolate. Grabbed the package his mother had sent, the journal, the locket, the letter, and placed it carefully in a bag. As they stepped outside the cold air, their faces sharp and clean. The world was white and silent, like it was holding its breath. He started the car. His wife sat beside him. The kids chattered sleepily in the back. He drove slowly through the falling snow. Every turn felt like a step toward something he'd almost lost. He didn't know what he'd say when he got there. Maybe nothing. Maybe just, "I'm sorry." Maybe just, "Thank you." But he knew one thing for sure. Family isn't about perfect moments or easy choices. It's about showing up even when you've messed up. Especially. Then and tonight, he was going to show up for her. For himself. For the truth they both deserved. The road ahead was dark, but the headlights cut through the snow like hope, pushing back the night. And for the first time in weeks, he felt like he was heading home. Part 2. The days after the letter passed slowly. I kept busy baking more cookies than I could ever eat, sweeping the porch, even though snow kept falling, folding laundry that didn't need folding. Anything to keep my hands moving so my mind wouldn't wander too far. But late at night, when the house was quiet and the only sound was the wind tapping against the window, I'd sit in my favorite chair with a cup of tea gone, cold, and think about him, not with anger, not with blame, just wondering what had changed. Was it something I said during my last visit? Maybe I stayed too long. Maybe I asked too many questions about their plans or their kids' school or how things were going at work. Or maybe I didn't say enough. Maybe I should have noticed the silence between them. The way his eyes would drop when his wife spoke. The way she never quite looked at me directly. I replayed every moment like a movie in my head, searching for clues. Like I was solving a puzzle I wasn't meant to solve, but then I'd stop myself. Because love shouldn't feel like a test you didn't know you were taking. One morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sun hadn't even risen yet, but I felt restless. I went to the closet in the hallway, the one I rarely opened anymore, and pulled out an old wooden box covered in dust. It had belonged to my sister, my younger sister who died way too soon. I sat on the floor right there in the hallway and opened it. Inside were photos, letters, dried flowers, and a small velvet pouch. I hadn't looked inside that pouch in over 30 years. My hands trembled as I untied the string. Inside was a silver locket. And a folded piece of paper yellowed with time. I unfolded it carefully. Her handwriting, light and looping like dancing butterflies, filled the page. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you're raising my boy like your own greater than. Thank you for giving him a home, a mother's love, and a second chance he doesn't know yet. But someday he will greater than. When he's ready, tell him I loved him more than stars, loved the sky greater than, and that you are not just his aunt, you are his heart." Ty closed my eyes. Tears fell without noise. I never told him. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I wanted him to grow up feeling safe, whole, loved without question. I didn't want him to wonder if I loved him less because he wasn't born from my body. So I tucked the truth away like a secret seed, hoping it would never need to sprout. But now I wondered if keeping that secret had cost me something I couldn't get back. Maybe his wife sensed something. Maybe she saw the way I looked at him sometimes, like he was both mine and not mine. Maybe she thought I was holding back, or worse, that I was pretending. I spent the whole day thinking, walking around the house, picking things up and putting them down again. Finally, I sat at the kitchen table with a fresh sheet of paper. I didn't write right away. I just stared at the blank page, letting the words form in my heart before they reached my hand. When I finally started writing, it wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was honest. I told him everything. How I held him for the first time in a hospital room while rain poured outside. How I rocked him to sleep when he cried for a mother he couldn't remember. How I saved every drawing he made, every report card, every tiny shoe he outgrew. How I never once wished he wasn't mine. And then I told him the truth about his birth mother. About her laugh, her kindness, her dreams. About how she begged me with her last breath to take care of him. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't ask him to understand right away. I just gave him the truth like a gift wrapped in silence for too long. Then I added one more thing. I told him I wouldn't come for Christmas. Not because I didn't want to, but because I respected his home, his peace, and his choice. But I also told him I'd leave something on his porch Christmas Eve. Something small. Something that might help him see the past clearly. I sealed the letter in an envelope. Then I went to the attic. It took me hours to find it. Boxers everywhere, old photo albums, winter coats, summer hats. But finally, behind a stack of blankets, I found it, a small metal trunk with a rusted lock. I used the key I'd kept on my keychain. Since the day I brought him home, inside were baby clothes, tiny socks, a stuffed bear with one eye missing, and a journal. His mother's journal. I sat on the dusty floor and flipped through the pages. She wrote about her hopes for him, her fears, her joy when she first felt him move, her plans for his future. On the last page she wrote, "Greater than. If I don't make it, please tell him I chose love even in the end, greater than. And that family isn't blood, it's who shows up when the world walks away." Place the journal gently into a padded envelope, along with my letter and the locket. I wrapped it in plain brown paper and tied it with red string, the same kind we used to use for Christmas packages when I was a girl. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was worried, but because my heart felt full in a strange new way. Like I'd finally let go of a weight I didn't know I was carrying. The next morning I drove into town. I mailed the package with no return address. Just his name and street. I didn't want him to feel pressured. I just wanted him to have it whenever he was ready. Back home, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. My hair was grayer than last year, my hands rougher, my steps slower. But my eyes, they still held the same softness they always had, because loving someone doesn't end just because they push you away. Sometimes love means stepping back, so they can see you clearly. Sometimes love means telling the truth even when it hurts. And sometimes love means trusting that if you plant a seed of honesty in good soil, it will grow even if you're not there to see the first green shoot. I made myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, watched the snow fall again. This time I didn't feel alone. I felt like I'd done what a mother should do. Give everything even when it's hard. Even when it's not returned. And that was enough. More than enough. Because real love doesn't demand. Seat at the table. It builds the table. And waits patiently for the ones it loves to find their way back. Part 1. The snow had just begun to fall when I found the letter. It was sitting right on top of the small pile of mail on my kitchen table. Nothing fancy about it. Just a plain white envelope with my name written in that. Familiar handwriting I'd known for over 40 years. My son's handwriting. I smiled as I picked it up. Christmas was only 2 weeks away, and I'd been waiting to hear from him. Every year without fail, he'd call or write to say, "Mom, come early this year, the kids miss you," or "We saved your favorite chair by the fireplace." This year I'd been extra excited because my youngest granddaughter had just learned how to bake gingerbread cookies all by herself. She'd told me on the phone last month, Grandma, you gotta taste them, they're perfect. But something felt off as I held the envelope. It was too light. No holiday card tucked inside. No cheerful stickers or drawings from the kids on the front. Just my name and my address in neat, careful letters. I opened it slowly. Maybe he was busy. Maybe work had been rough. Maybe his wife wasn't feeling well. I tried to think of every good reason before. I even read the words. But there were only 2 lines. Don't come for Christmas. My wife is against Wa. Just smiled. That was it. No explanation? No, I'm sorry. No. Let's talk about this. Just those cold, hard words like a door closing quietly but firmly. For a second I couldn't breathe. My hands shook a little. The room got quiet even though the old radiator was still clanking away in the corner. Outside, the snow kept falling soft and steady like nothing in the world had changed. I read it again, then a third time, hoping maybe I'd missed something. Hoping it was a joke. But a WASN, tout my own son didn't want me at his house for Christmas. His wife, the woman I'd welcomed into our family with open arms, was the reason why. I sat down at the table. The wooden chair creaked under me like it always did. I looked around my little kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd made pancakes every Sunday, morning for 25 years while he sat at this very table doing homework or drawing pictures of spaceships. The same kitchen where I'd held him when his first dog died and where he'd kissed. My cheek before leaving for college, all those memories suddenly felt heavy, like they were pressing down on my chest. I thought about calling him right then, asking what happened. Was it something I said last summer when I visited? Did I leave dishes in the sink? Did I talk too much about his childhood in front of his friends? Maybe I hugged his wife too much or too little? Maybe I gave the wrong gift last year? Maybe I laughed at the wrong time, but then I remembered something my mother used to tell me when I was young. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And right now my son was showing me that my presence wasn't welcome in his home. That his wife's feelings mattered more than mine. That after all these years of birthdays, holidays, school plays, hospital visits, and late-night phone calls, I could be set aside with just one sentence. A part of me wanted to cry, another part wanted to yell. But instead I did something strange. I smiled. Not a big smile, not a happy one, but the kind of smile that comes when you finally understand something you've been avoiding for a long time. The kind of smile that says, okay, I see now. The truth was, I'd seen little signs over the past few years. The way his wife would go quiet when I walked into the room, how she'd make excuses not to join us for dinner when I visited, how my son started canceling plans last minute, saying she's not feeling great, or it's just not a good time. I told myself it was stress, or new motherhood, or just her personality. I never pushed, never asked too many questions. I just kept showing up with love, hoping it would be enough. But love isn't always enough, and someone has already made up their mind. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Then I stood up and walked to the window. The snow was coming down harder now, covering the driveway, the mailbox, the old oak tree, where my son used to climb as a boy. I thought about all the Christmases we'd shared. The year he was 5 and insisted on wearing his dinosaur pajamas to midnight mass. The year he was 16 and played guitar for the whole family after dinner. The year he brought his wife home for the first time and I stayed up all night baking. Her favorite pie, because he'd mentioned once that she loved apple crumble. I'd done everything I knew how to do as a mother. Patience, with kindness, with quiet strength. And yet here I was, standing alone in my kitchen on a snowy December afternoon, holding a letter that told me I wasn't wanted. But you know what I realized in that moment? I still loved him. Not because he deserved it, not because he earned it, but because love like this doesn't stop just because someone pushes you away. Real love keeps going even when it hurts, even when it's not returned the same way. So I smiled again, this time a little softer, because I knew what I had to do. I wouldn't show up uninvited. I wouldn't call crying or begging for answers. I wouldn't post sad messages online or talk badly about his wife to relatives. That wasn't me. That wouldn't fix anything. Instead, I would give him space. I would respect his choice even if it broke my heart. And I would wait. Not with anger. Not with guilt. But with hope. Hope that one day he'd look back and remember all the times I showed up for him without asking for anything in return. Hope that he'd realize family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up even when it's messy. Hope that his wife might one day see me not as a threat, but as someone who only ever wanted the best for them both. But mostly I hoped that if he ever needed me, if he ever truly needed me, he'd know exactly where to find me. Right here, in this little house. The creaky kitchen chair and the old radiator and a heart that still beat for him no matter what. I turned away from the window and went to the pantry. I pulled out flour, sugar, cinnamon, and butter. I wasn't going to his house for Christmas, but that didn't mean I couldn't bake anyway. I rolled out the dough slowly, cut out stars, trees, and little snowmen. Placed them gently on the tray. As the sweet smell filled the kitchen, I felt something shift inside me. Peace, not the loud kind. Not the kind that comes from winning an argument or proving a point, but the quiet, deep peace that comes from knowing you did your best, from choosing grace over bitterness, from loving without conditions. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the oven hummed softly, and I stood there, covered in flour, smiling not because I was happy, but because I was free. Free from needing to be needed, free from trying to fix what wasn't mine to fix. It's free to love without strings. My son might not want me at his table this Christmas, but that didn't mean stop being his mother. It just meant I loved him enough to let him go, even if only for a little while.